Good afternoon, and welcome to this meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. We're glad you're here to join us today. Just want to give just a few housekeeping reminders for everyone before we get the meeting started. First of all, if you are not an applicant and you are interested in addressing the commission, we do have some forms for you to sign up to speak to us. Those forms are located outside at the desk, just outside the doors. Just a few reminders. We do ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes, that you avoid. We do reserve the right to stop your time if there are any repetitious items or anything that we've heard repeatedly. We want to make sure that we are being respectful of everyone's time here. We'd ask that you please address your comments directly to the commission as opposed to the applicant or each other, because we want to make sure that that everything remains respectful and that we are following the process. So I think that's all I've got on those reminders. So we can start on the first part of our agenda, which is to receive the minutes from the July 14th meeting. And I think, unless there are any changes, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval or acceptance of the minutes.
And we are ready for a motion to receive the minutes from the July 14th, 2022 meeting. It's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available.
This is Rusty. I'm I. I think I forgot my password.
Commissioner LaForge votes yes, as he figures out his password.
You have to identify.
And Commissioner
all the
Govein's
traffic
almost
lights.
there. And has voted yes. Do we have everybody? And that motion to receive the minutes has passed. We're now on to continuance requests, and we'll begin with uncontested continuance requests. And I'll ask Mr. Butler to please read those.
Yes, item 16 is SP 557, request to defer to August 11th. Item 17, case CE 1065, defer to August 25th. Item 18, case CE 1066, defer to August 25th. Case number 19, case CE 1075, defer to August 25th. And number 20, case PC 10781, defer to October 13th.
Thank you. Is there anyone here wanting to be heard on any of those items that we just listed? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion to approve the uncontested continuance requests.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the uncontested continuances as read.
Commissioner Clare has moved to approve the uncontested continuance requests. It's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner LaForge is all good. And that motion has passed. We're now in line for new continuance requests.
This item 12 is case SPUD 1428, deferred to August 11th, and item 13, case SP 568, has been withdrawn.
Is there anyone that wanted to be heard on any one of those items? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
I move to approve the new continuances as read.
And Commissioner Clare has moved to that we approve the new continuance requests as read, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available. And that motion has passed. And we are now ready for consideration of our consent docket.
Item 1 is case C7461, final plat of Brookstone Village, located south of Southwest 29th Street and east of South Mustang Road. Item 2 is case C7462, final plat of Featherstone, addition section 17, located west of Southwestern Avenue and south of Southwest 149th Street. Item 3 is case PV 112, application to vacate a portion of the final plat of Westminster Heights 1, and that is located north of Northwest 43rd Street and east of Northwestern Avenue. And the last one, item 4, case SN 094, consider a request to change the name of Deer Crest Boulevard to Marketplace Boulevard, located north of West Memorial Road and east of North Rockwell Avenue.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to have item number 3 pulled from the consent agenda.
All right. So we're going to So I think we're in line for a motion to approve the consent docket except for item 3.
I move to approve the consent docket excluding item 3.
The motion by Commissioner Clare is to approve the consent, recommend approval of the consent docket except for item 3. It's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We are now in line for for items requiring a separate vote, and first we'll begin with item 3.
I'd like to hear from staff on this item. I'm a little unclear about what it is we're doing here and why exactly. This is a SPUD and plat that have not been in place all that long. And since this is not on the edge of the plat, as I understand it, it's sort of in the middle of the plat. I'm just a little unclear about what it is that's actually getting vacated and what the result of that will be.
Okay. Yeah, Jared Martin, Subdivision Zoning. So the reason for the request is the way the current plat divides that area up. You've got one lot north, one lot south. Along the property line for both of those lots, the shared property line, you also have private easements that are there for private utility lines, and then you also have build lines based on that shared property line. As a result, they can't buy both lots and build one house that would take up both lots, which would look more like a traditional house would have, before this was platted that way. So they're asking to vacate. They had a laundry list of things to vacate, so rather than vacate each, partial vacate each one of those things individually, they're just vacating both lots completely so that it would basically go back to the way it was before, to where they could just build a traditional house on those lots.
So how will that affect the lots on either side of it?
So the way the plat was originally set up, there was going to be basically 4 small homes that would share kind of a common drive. The common drive was a little, each side had a certain amount that was needed for both units on the 2 lots. So 4 lots together, kind of a central drive, but the 2 that are already there already have enough of a drive that it can service both of them. So even though the drive on the other side won't be there, it's not going to hinder the access by the ones that are there. So from the street, if you look at the image that's on there now, if you go just slightly east of where the property's called out, you can see kind of like a quadplex there.
Right,
with a
yes,
standard drive.
I'm very familiar with this
So
area. And how it's
the
built
drive
there.
is already built on the ones that are adjacent to this, but then these people could still have their own separate drive adjacent to it. So
Are there no utilities in place between these lots?
there's not. So the sewer line is at the north end in the alleyway that's platted, was previously platted, so that's where the sewer line is. The water line's in the street, right of way in front of them. And then the easements that were there were for private service lines that, because this, if you had the property on the south, you would have to have an easement to get your sewer line to the north. And then same for the property on the north would have to have an easement to get their private water line to the south. So that's what those were for. And since they're going to be building one house, they're not going to need that. They didn't have any really lateral public lines going east or west. It was just for the 2 on that lot. I think that made sense.
Looking at the final plat of Westminster Heights, I'm a little confused about what it is that's happening directly to the west of what shows there as Lot 8. The numbering for these is kind of, ribboned. It's a little bit odd. But you would think that next to the west of 8 would be 9, but there's not any number at all on that lot. You have some explanation for that for me? I can't read anything about this.
So that one was actually a common area, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're 100% satisfied that this is not going to create a problem for the city, that's fine with me. I'm a little bit concerned, facade, I'm not sure exactly what. This was kind of an innovative plan for the development of this area when it was implemented, or when it was put in place. Some of it has been implemented, some of it's been sitting for a while. I wonder if this, indicates that they're sort of giving up on that plan for the development of the rest of it. But separate and apart from that, I don't have an issue with this. So thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that wanted to be heard on item 3, PV 112? Any other questions, comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion to approve.
I'll move for approval of item number 3, is it, PV 112?
Commissioner Powers has moved to approve PV 112, and I believe we'll have a second as soon as we can work it on our system. It's been seconded by Commissioner LaForge. Please cast your votes when available.
Thank you. That's why you're going to make a better vice chair.
And that motion has passed. I believe So I believe we're now in line for item 5.
Item 5 is PUD SP 1748A, application for a specific plan pursuant to the application of PUD 1748, located at 13601 Southwestern Avenue.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is the specific plan application for the commercial portion of what is called the Palermo Place development. I believe Ms. Powers is the only member of the commission that is left from when this was approved. But when it was approved, it was a very lengthy process, lots and lots of protests. Cindy, you're not Cindy, Jared, could you go to the aerial? This is a combination of both the commercial frontage along Western, but also there is a significant single-family home subdivision that exists to the west of this that has been building out over the last, I'm gonna say 5 years or so, and then now we're finally to this portion. You can see, there you go, you can see where there are homes, and in fact, if you look in aerial, there's more than that. So it's an area of the city that's growing quickly, and as we often say from this podium is, retail and other things trail rooftops, and this application is a testament to that. So it does conform to everything within the PUD, with one exception. I submitted a revised narrative this week. We have a, Jared, not Cindy, if you could go to the site plan. We have a companion Board of Adjustment case. You can see our buildings are actually doing what we have from staff comments in the past about having the buildings front western. Well, what that's requiring us to go do, of course, is get a variance from the Board of Adjustment to the setback, because the setback there is 25 feet. The way that it's designed, we can't meet parking ratios. So we obviously aren't looking for anything from this commission as it relates to the Board of Adjustment, but Mr. Privet will see it in a couple of weeks, and so what we're asking for is approval of this with the requested 15-foot setback if the board were to approve it. If the board weren't to approve it, then it'll likely require, yeah, Privet's covering his ears, it will require a complete redo of the zoning for the site. But we believe in the specific plan, the vote from the commission could be approval with the requested 15-foot setback, subject to Board of Adjustments approval.
I was here in 2020.
Were you here for the? Well, you were here for the commercial. I don't think you were here for the residential piece.
And so this is Ward 5, so Commissioner Hinkle, do you want to start off our discussion about this?
Is there anybody signed up that wants to speak on this?
No. Is there anyone that wanted to be heard on this item? I think we're good.
This is in conformance with what was planned years ago. I don't have a problem with it. It's going to be a nice addition to, like you said, a rapidly growing area. So unless anybody else has any comments, I'm ready to make a motion.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I think we're ready.
I will move approval on PUDSP 1748.
With the 15-foot setback recommendation along
Yes.
Western.
Provided it goes through.
That, I know nothing about
A
it.
nice little loophole. I get to talk about it in the presence of a BOA member.
And so the motion is that we recommend approval of PUDS, the special permit, specific plan approval 1748. That is, the motion's been made by Commissioner Hinkle and seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available.
Thank you.
And the motion passes. We're ready for item 6.
Item 6 is CE 1078, application to close a 20-foot by 20-foot triangular utility easement located on the southwest corner of Block 1 of the Citizen Edition at 600 North Robinson Avenue.
So, the applicant.
Sir. Alec Bass, Wallace Design Collective, 410 North Walnut, representing the applicant today. We are requesting to close and vacate this triangular section of right-of-way at the northeast corner, Northwest 5th and Robinson, in order to construct a building at this location. We did coordinate with staff back in February and have written email confirmation from Traffic Division and Oklahoma City Utilities and Drainage that they have nothing within this easement. We did receive the staff report Monday morning with the TEs here that have now become standard, but and we immediately reached out to staff, Mr. Lodge, and provided him with a copy of the survey that we had provided back in February. So we have satisfied TE number 2, but he is working through reviewing that and making sure that we don't get delayed and go into commission. And it has been explained to us that if we accept these TEs, we can still proceed to council with this TE, apply for our building permit without having this fully closed here. And once our building permit is approved is when the closure is officially accepted.
I cannot speak to that, but I'd ask staff to speak to that if
I
I
just-
cannot confirm that for you.
Right, I just want to get that on the record, just so that we don't have any surprises if we accept these as is.
I don't
and
believe
move
that's within
forward.
the commission's authority at this point. Am I mistaken with that too, as far as the process as you've laid it out? I want to make sure that we're clear about what our approval does and does not mean.
Okay, or if you'd like to elaborate on the city's position here, but it's just tough to
So
agree.
it needs a little clarification. On our way back from up these stairs, we ran into Mr. Bass, and we were trying to explain to him the TEs and the way they functioned. And I'll correct him slightly. The information he was provided was a little bit different than that. He had a discussion with Mr. Lodge, who I seem to have lost back here. And we were talking about the timing. So when he does not have approved plans, when he has approved plans, the discussion that we had with him was that at the vacation stage, we can then release the interests there where we don't have easements, so long as we have approved plans at that time, and that would be the trigger. I believe that's what we said in the hallway. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so that, in that way, it will not hold up his progress, but it leaves the standard TEs in there. That is the discussion we had. Now, he got hit with this cold, so I'm not saying that he agreed to this, but we wanted to make sure he understood what we were saying, so that when he came up here, he could express himself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. If this is going to be the standard going forward, we want to see how some of these go through to have this level of comfort. As written, the scary part is that we can proceed with doing all of our building plans and everything, and then Oklahoma City Utilities decide to change their mind later, or somebody else new come in that wasn't involved in our discussions back in February. Now, I'm agreeable to, once a building permit is pulled or something to that effect, that this goes away, but I don't want to leave it open that we can be denied by Public Works and Utilities for reasons that have not been expressed to us to date.
So what we were discussing with Mr. Bass in the hallway is there's mutual risk. We have many plans that come through, Planning Commission, even through council, that then never are built. But once the easements and everything have been closed and vacated, the city has lost those. So there are applications that go in for which we never have approved plans, for which are never built. And then when someone subsequently comes in to develop, the city has to pay money to repurchase those easements. All right. So there has to be some coordination, and there's some trust on both sides as to when the release is of the rights of the city versus when we have approved plans and we feel comfortable that we are going forward and this is what will be built. So I do not disagree with Mr. Bass that there is some risk there, but there's also a great deal of risk on the city side and a great deal of cost that we have absorbed for easements that we have released and then subsequently have to be purchased.
Well, I think just for clarification here, does the existing language in Technical Evaluation 1 meet your expectations going forward as explained to you in your conversation with city staff? Because if it doesn't, then that's the discussion that the commission now needs to make, is do we require you to follow the language as written? Because I'm concerned, and I apologize if I can't fully repeat exactly your understanding, but it sounds like we're not having a matching of understandings between you and the municipal counselor's office.
Correct. So it's a perpetual easement, and the way it's worded here is that it would not be closed until such time that plans have been approved by the Public Works and Utilities Departments. That's kind of open-ended. If we go through this process without these TEs, in the language of the closure passed by City Council, it will have a reservation in there that the city has the right to reopen the easement until such time it's been vacated in district court. So during the district court action is when the city would have an opportunity to object if we have not satisfied these TEs prior to that time.
So I'd like to be clear, and just for the record, what the TE says is at the time of approved plans, not the building permit, approved plans, okay? So we're clear on that issue.
It sounds like we're about to deal with the exact same issue momentarily on a couple of other items today. Perhaps the best way, and I'm looking to commissioners to say otherwise, perhaps the best way for us to handle this is, since we are going to deal with this exact same TE language for a couple of other items, perhaps now is the moment for us to decide, or at least consider, the arguments around whether or not to go forward with this TE language. And so my recommendation is, hold on, Mr. Box, give me 1 second. My recommendation is that first we give commissioners a chance to ask the questions that they may have of the applicant as far as the applicant's expectations of the municipal counselor. And then if there are audience members that are wishing to be heard for their 5 minutes, we would be more than happy to hear from them regarding their thoughts on TE1.
Mr. Chair, or alternatively, what if we postpone this one until later in the meeting, till the end of the meeting? Giving us a chance to go over these other items when Mr. Box might be representing them and could just speak about his own. We would hear a few of these and then be able to make a decision on this one.
point, too.
Either way.
I'm open to
He'd
that
either
one
be
as long
talking
as you
as an
don't mind.
audience member, or maybe he could just talk as an applicant.
As the applicant, it's true.
Yeah, either way.
How do you feel about it? If we
I'd be willing to
delayed
follow him if he wants to argue his individual case. Right now, it's just the ambiguity of plans being approved is my concern, so.
My only reservation about
Please.
that is that I'm fairly certain there are other members of the development community who would like to be heard on this topic, who don't happen to have cases on the agenda today and are not here to speak. So, I mean, before we make some kind of a policy decision that's going to change the way we have done things up until this point, I think maybe it's appropriate to have a little bit wider discussion of that, even than would be afforded by hearing other cases that are on the docket today.
So you're saying you agree with Commissioner LaForge? Let's wait.
She's meeting even later than today, I think, right?
I
You're saying
am,
defer.
You know, maybe even,
Continue?
or strike it, either one.
Well, then let's go ahead. It sounds like we need to just go ahead and hear this out. So the question for commissioners is, it sounds like the applicant has objections to TE1, concerns that TE1 does not sufficiently meet the needs that you have.
Yes, sir, we have concerns on that. T2, we provided that, and we feel comfortable with it.
So the question before the commission is, do we require the applicant to keep TE1? Do we strike TE1? Or do we defer and have a further discussion about TE1? It sounds like that's the debate. The applicant Do you want to respond to that statement, and then we can hear from the municipal counselor's office? Then we can hear from the audience, and I'm certain there's an audience member that would love to be heard on this item.
I would be happy to let Mr. Box argue his case on this exact same language and see where that lands.
But we're going to end up with the same issue, so.
Right. One other issue with this particular one is we are in the downtown area. At the time that this was dedicated back in the 80s, site triangles were still a thing in downtown. Now, with Project 180, we're wanting all those buildings to go out to the property line, so this little triangle is keeping us from doing that. So we're just trying to mitigate our risk before we proceed with spending money on all these plans. So yes, I'm happy to let the public speak.
I might comment on that as well as Ward 6, is this is an urban, that's a very good point, Mr. Bass, and we do need to pay attention to the unique characteristics of this particular application because it's not an alley closure or a traditional location of city drainage infrastructure.
Right.
It's a triangle of a site in an urban condition. I think it's important.
I have a quick question. Am I to understand you guys did provide a survey already that shows existing utilities?
So we had pre-development meeting back in February, then submitted for this application beginning of the summer. With the number of departments, Mr. Lodge had not had the opportunity to be familiar with our project. So whenever we saw the staff report on Monday, it's the first time we saw this language. We did provide him with the survey from there. I've got a copy of the utilities atlas showing water and sewer not in there. I've got a copy of the survey.
I'm not really concerned with the atlas because it's GIS and it's not necessarily accurate, but does your survey show utilities within that area?
No, sir.
Okay. Public or private?
Correct.
Okay. So then my question for the municipal counselor's office is the intent of this to reserve this for anything that the city might want to put in there between now and when the applicant builds their building?
It's not just for between now and when the applicant builds their building, but also into the future. If you assume that all projects will be approved and all projects will be built, then the fact that Mr. Bass presents, then there would not be a need for construction there. If you do not assume that all projects will be approved and all projects will be built, then the easement will have been vacated, and then the city will be without them for the next developer or the developer next door who might want to build it, who has to put a water line through there. And we're suddenly buying that easement back from another property owner. The state statute provides that even on closure. So after the Planning Commission considers the issue and makes their recommendation, it goes to the City Council. The City Council has to pass an ordinance which closes the easements. That closure is subject to being reopened at any time for current or future uses until such time as it's vacated. When we get to vacate, a petition is filed with the district court, and we appear there. A lot of these things are worked out at that level at terms as to, because at that point, we generally have, as Mr. Bass presents, an approved plan. And then the city takes some risk in going forward with the vacation and giving up the easement rights that it holds for the public, assuming that approved plans means it's actually going to be built.
But that statement to me, and so help me clarify this for anyone else that might be having trouble following this issue, but to me, that is an indication that TE1's not needed. Why am I wrong in that assessment?
So the TE1 is put in there to put both the applicant and the Planning Commission on notice that these are the rights of the city. When you strike TE1, it's a statement, it's a at least implied statement by the Planning Commission that these easements are not needed, but those rights still exist and the City Council still has those. So then you have this incongruity between what is perceived as the Planning Commission saying and what then goes before City Council. So then it puts us in a position where if the applicant shows up and says, well, Planning Commission waived it, you have to waive it too, which is not necessarily true, and then there's suddenly a conflict between two city bodies. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page to understand the entire concept.
But I guess I take issue with the language you just used, so please stop me if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. What I thought that I understood you to say was that you're putting the applicant on notice of the city's rights by statute. Regardless of whether they receive this notice, if it's the city's right, it will remain the city's right, regardless of whether TE1 is in or not. Am I wrong in that assessment?
No, that is a correct statement.
So then why don't we just right now delete TE1?
That's what we usually do.
Like, that's what I'm not following.
So, so what you're proposing is to not include TE1.
Right, and so I'm asking, please, go ahead,
On that,
Commissioner Govine.
which would be, how does the applicant get approved plans? Wouldn't the utilities department kick that back and say, you've just submitted a building that's in a city easement, I can't approve that?
The city always works with developers who want to change the sculpture of the land. I'll give you a Tim Johnson example. Tim Johnson had a plan for down here near the boulevard. He had preliminary designs already at the time that he made his application for closure that showed he's going to relocate the water line here and the sewer line here. So we did not need the existing easement because we had easements from the property owner. We knew whether they were going to go in. They were approved plans. So that created a situation where the city could comfortably, release those easements because they knew that those facilities and those public needs were going to be met. But when we do not have plans yet, or the applicant comes and says, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, how do we say for sure that we don't need this easement? You don't even know what you're going to do there yet. How can we say this is not necessary to serve the public?
What I'm hearing is that the financial burden basically is like a sliding scale. And even if they have plans, even if they have preliminary plans, till the walls start going up, you don't know that's what's going to happen there, right? I mean, so it's like, well, but we want to think we know a little bit more than we do now before we agree to this. I think there's one other little piece of this. I'm not sure whether it plays exactly into this discussion, but we have been told as a planning commission by the municipal counselor's office in the past on a number of occasions that once the city closes a street, an alley, an easement, it feels constrained is how I would put it. We've been told they cannot go into district court and exercise their right to reopen. That once it's been closed, they feel like they haven't got the authority to refuse vacation. And I've never agreed with that. So that's one of the reasons why it sticks in my mind. But we have been told that a number of times.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we've gotten going so long, I think we're going to keep going. It's a short docket. I think 2 of the last 3 items both have this issue. If we deferred this to the end of the meeting, I wouldn't like to answer this one now and then regret it here in about 45 minutes because I hear something different. I'm going to make a motion, y'all can deny it, but is to defer this to the end of the docket, give us a chance to hear the rest of the information. And I get it, maybe we need more time, but Mr. Box, who's representing a couple applicants later, he is very knowledgeable and he's here a lot, and I just want to hear from him. I don't think it's appropriate for him to be arguing on another matter, though. This is so distinct that I don't, it's urban, it's all these things, so I don't feel comfortable having Mr. Box come up on somebody else's item. So I make a motion to defer this to the end of the docket. They're not going to have to wait too long. It's not like it's going to be 3 hours today, I don't think. Make a motion to defer this to the end of the docket.
The motion is to table this item till the end of the agenda. I think you're right that it does come down to some specifics of each case, but the issue is pretty much going to look identical. As far as the legal analysis, it's going to look identical. But I'm open. Commissioners, any discussion before we? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Hinkle's seconding the motion to table this item to the end of the docket. Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. I think the rest of the audience should be very grateful for
That was my second reason.
look forward. All right, I think we're ready for item 7.
Item 7 is SP 566, application to operate a drinking establishment, sit-down alcohol permitted in the C3 district, located at 8029 Southwest 3rd Street.
Thank you. Is there an applicant present? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record, and you've got 5
JT
minutes.
Walker, 8029 Southwood 3rd.
Great. Tell us about your project.
We had leased this building out. COVID had shut it down when we had the mandatory shutdowns in 2020. The gentleman that we had it leased to didn't have the funds to reopen it, so we've had a vacant building sitting there, so we're just trying to get the building back open and operating like it was.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Fraley, this is in your ward. Would you like to start our discussion?
In reviewing the staff report, there were no technical evaluations on the item, and the item is being opened as it was opened and operating before. So does anybody else here to speak on it?
Is there anyone wanting to be heard on this item? Doesn't appear so. Any questions or comments from commissioners? I think we're ready.
I make a motion to approve item SP-566.
And Commissioner Fraley has moved to recommend approval of SP 566 to City Council. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're ready for item 8.
Item 8 is SPUD 1433, application to rezone 9020 North I-35 Service Road from C3 to SPUD 1433.
Good afternoon, Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road. On behalf of the applicant, what you have before you today is a I-1 light industrial spud just south of Britton Road on the east side of I-35. It is consistent and compatible with the surrounding uses. Staff recommends approval without any TEs. We would ask for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And this is Ward 7, and I am in support and have no questions. Are there any questions for the applicant from the commission?
I have a couple of questions.
Please.
I don't see anything that tells me how many signs it will have, how tall they will be.
We just put in the spud that it would be, signage would be per I-1.
And what will that be?
I'm not sure at this time, but
JJ, can anyone tell us?
Standard commercial pole sign, 200 square feet, 40 feet tall, 50 feet tall, excuse me.
And how many will it be permitted?
With the amount of frontage they have, I would think just one.
It does say non-accessory signs are prohibited. As are electronic messages.
Okay.
Any other questions, Commissioner Powers? Anyone from the audience wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, with this being your ward, I will move recommendation of approval of SPUD 1433.
Thank you. The motion from Commissioner Clare is to recommend approval of SPUD 1433, seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available.
thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Ready for item 9.
Item 9 is SPUD 1434, application to rezone 5921 South Walker from C3.
Blaine Nice, 100 North Broadway, on behalf of the applicant. The applicant owns a commercial property at 59th and South Walker. This was kind of a ask for permission, not forgiveness. They have the ability to have a food truck there now for 12 hours, and it could leave and come back. But they are asking, we asked staff about having one that would be there longer, maybe several days, and then have other food trucks come in and stay for a day or so. And the discussion was, well, the only way to really allow this under the code is to do a spud, and that's what we've done. It meets all the requirements. Their goal is not to have the same truck there all the time, 24/7, but to have different trucks, but maybe the food truck owner desires to leave it there for a while. They're not going to operate 24 hours a day. I've spoken to a couple of you, and and there wasn't any issues. There were no protests prior to this, but I did run into some people in the audience that live in the neighborhood and have some concerns about the traffic, the foot traffic and everything. But I just want to point out to the commission that a food truck could stay there for 12 hours now. So it could be there from 1 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning, or 12 noon to 12 midnight now. It would just have to move. So this just basically gives the ability for the food truck owner not to have to move this every day. And it's a commercial property, and it's consistent with the other properties around it. So we're asking the recommendation approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is Ward 4. Commissioner Privet, would you like to lead our discussion on this?
Sure. There is an existing food truck that's been there, right?
Well, I
Where you're
think
just
on and
explaining
off,
it.
but
Just-
yes.
Yeah,
it's-
and you move it.
I mean,
they just want
and I
it to be
talked
more
to
permanent.
staff. I mean, there's food trucks all over, particularly on the Shields area that there. I drive by there on my way to work, and they're there all the time. As I said, we're trying to ask for permission and not forgiveness. I know it's one of those situations where, these things are everywhere, but this is quite a commercial lot, and the way this food truck will sit up, it's going to abut it's on the south west side. There's I called it a little power grid there. It's and so it will not, this is not going to be on the side of the residential property, which is to the north. And I know that neighbors are concerned about the traffic, but it's kind of a busy corner already, so.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Food truck in South Oklahoma City, it's pretty standard, I think. So,
I did have one question, and it is about additional uses. You added, it sounds to me like we're adding not just the outdoor sales and display, which would allow you to have the food truck perpetually, but also we're adding use unit 8300.14, automotive and equipment
No,
cleaning.
well, that's what's there now.
That's there now.
And that's
Okay.
what I'm saying. We only wanted in staff, we said, we've got to list the current uses that we could use. The only additional use is this food
Exactly.
truck.
Okay.
we're
Just wanted to be clear.
Yeah. We're not changing anything else, so.
Excellent.
Now, we couldn't come in and do some industrial use or anything, no.
Any other questions from commissioners on this item before we hear from the audience? Excellent, thank you. I don't believe I have anyone signed up to speak at this point, but is there anyone from I've got two. Oh, I didn't even see it, sorry. Very sorry. Okay, the first person is Lawrence Peoples? Great. Please give us your name and address for the record, and remember you have 5 minutes.
Lawrence Peoples, I live at 509 Southwest 57th Street. I'm very much opposed to the rezoning. I'm not aware that there's ever been a food truck on that corner, and the fact that it is on the southwest corner, all the noise on 59th Street reverberates onto 57th Street. There is no 58th Street, that's a little creek, so we're the first street. We have to keep our windows and our doors closed because of the noise, the increased noise. It wasn't always that way. It's been a fairly quiet neighborhood over the years. It is increasing in traffic. That's my number one concern. That's the first of 4 concerns that I'm going to speak to you today on. We live on cul-de-sacs that are up against Lightning Creek, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to get in and out of our property, especially at peak driving hours of the day, especially the evening hours. Excuse me. Excuse me. And if these food trucks are allowed to be on that particular corner, even though it's commercialized, we have circuses at Walker Square, but they come and they go. Food trucks are there to stay. And so my second concern besides traffic would be the noise that's generated from those food trucks, not to mention the pollution that that are spewing out of their trucks. And we hear this, and also the litter that's generated from food trucks. The third thing would be the safety of the neighborhood. Already we have the Hope Center at 59th and Walker, or not on it. It's a block south, and we have a lot of marginalized people in the neighborhood. It's unfortunate that they have mental problems and that they're alcoholics, but they are not in the larger group of society. And they tend to walk around our neighborhoods. We've had to call the police on occasion and have people removed from doorsteps when the occupants of the home were not even present. And we feel like if these food trucks are there, this will, especially if they go on in the evening hours, would generate a lot of unsavory types of people, gangs and that sort of thing. We do have a high crime rate in South Oklahoma City. We're understaffed with policemen, so why bring any more trouble? Why not just leave the zoning the way it is? There are plenty of restaurants in the neighborhood. There are 3 within a half a block of their establishment, both to the east and 3 to the west, not to mention a supermarket across, so they're not without food. But I'm concerned about the evening hours mostly, and the type of people it would draw. It's very quiet in the evening, even though it's commercialized. It's very quiet in the evening, and we can get in the fall and the evening, and the fall and the spring, we cannot open our doors and windows because of the increased traffic on 59th Street and the blub, 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 and just the loud noises that go on. And so my fourth concern would be my property values plummeting if food trucks were in. There are food trucks everywhere throughout South Oklahoma City. Walker Avenue has always been a nice tree-lined street all the way from here down to Rest Haven Cemetery, with the exception of 25th Street. It's a very quiet street. It's very nice to drive down, unlike Western Avenue that's filled with corporate hamburger joints and lined with ugly-looking strip malls, which make up most of Oklahoma City. So why take a nice street and ruin it? But those are my 4 points: the traffic, the noise, the litter, the third thing would be the general safety of the neighborhood, and the fourth thing would be the property values. And I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Next, we have, any questions for Mr. Peoples from commissioners? Next, we have Bill Gaylor. And we've already heard Mr. Gaylor about concerns regarding noise on 59th Street, traffic concerns being generated, the pollution and litter, and the sounds of the food truck itself. We've heard concerns from Mr. Peoples regarding safety, including crime, and we've also heard concerns about the operation during evening hours. We also heard concerns about property values as well.
Yes.
Do you have any additional comments to those?
If I can.
Please.
I recently moved to the neighborhood about 3 years ago, and I moved over to this neighborhood because it was quiet. I had property for many years on the north side, and one of the things that came in a mile away from me and changed that traffic was a food truck, and it became 24 hours on that particular location on a corner like this one is. I was on the way to the hospital to take a friend, and I watched a robbery of that food truck. And a few days later, I went and talked to the owner, and they said, yes, we have had several robberies. That's a concern to me. And it was late at night. It was like 11, 12 o'clock. It was traumatizing to me and other people. I also had rental property that was 3 blocks away. I lost tenants because of the robbery of that. I know it falls along with the crime, but that's a great issue of concern because it brings in different type of traffic. My next concern would be, what are their hours of operation that they want to be? I'm afraid that if it's at midnight, 1 o'clock, we don't have anything going on in that neighborhood. After 10 o'clock, there's not even a convenience store, if I'm correct, that's open 24 hours at all right there on that corner. And it does bring in a different type of traffic, which I personally don't want to see happen. It's part of the reason why I moved to that neighborhood from the north side, because of all of that traffic that comes along that time of day. Appreciate your hearing me today.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. And would you mind providing your address also for the record? I'm not sure if we got that. Mr. Gaylor?
Oh, my address, sorry. 513 Southwest 57th.
Thank you so much.
You bet. You bet.
Is there anyone else who wanted to be heard on item 9? Anyone else? Okay, then I'm going to turn this discussion over to the commission. I appreciate the comments from neighbors. I do have a question for staff. Would someone please explain their existing rights to operate a food truck right now, regardless of whether this commission takes action on this item today?
They shouldn't have any rights to operate a food truck at this point in C3. So they'll have to have this zoning for a food truck.
Gotcha. So they do not have the ability to have a food truck now. They can't get some like revocable, I get that, they could go through some permitting or something to do that?
No, they don't have the proper zoning.
Excellent. And so, and I'd also like to ask, to start off this discussion, we would have the right to impose hours of operations through this SPUD, correct? So that is one of the tools in our toolbox. And I would certainly, if we're leaning towards supporting this application, I will strongly vote for limitations to the hours of operation, but.
Well, and in addition to that, the number of food trucks allowed on property.
Absolutely.
Yep.
What was that you said, Nate?
The number of food trucks allowed on the property at one time.
Mr. Nice?
Please.
Yes, I wasn't clear, I'm sorry. There's only going to be one at a time, and we would be willing to limit that. Midnight, we're certainly not going to have to operate after midnight.
About 10 o'clock.
I guess my client is, okay, we can put that in there, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The applicant's willing to move to limit it to one food truck and limit the hours of operation to no later than 10 o'clock. Thoughts on that, commissioners?
I might just start by saying a couple of things. The concerns you raised, while I listened to them, certainly, one of my issues is hard corner of a pretty major intersection is one thing. If this were off the beaten path, if we're trying to put it, near the park, off of this major street, those are much more compelling. Most of the concerns you raised sound to me to just like the issues that exist in a major intersection in the middle of Oklahoma City. So I hear them, and it may incrementally change it a little bit, but it's a tire shop during the day. It's there's a lot of activity on that hard corner. So I hear all your concerns, about noise and pollution, all those things. But it's the kind of thing that in a back into a quiet neighborhood would be one thing, but right there on the hard corner intersection, I'm gonna be supporting it with these limits that they just mentioned. Sure.
I do think
Mr.
it's
Peoples,
also worth.
you've already had an opportunity to address the commission, but do you want to just make one comment quickly? Mr. Peoples, you have to address this from the mic.
I do think that it is worth pointing out that this is essentially a downzoning of this property. It's currently zoned C3. So there are a lot of things that could be on this property that would be much more intrusive without the controls of an SPUD than this use, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's further restricted to food truck only.
Go ahead, Commissioner
I was
Goving.
going to ask the applicant, I presume maybe if they could clarify, presumably the part of the permission you're looking for, so it's not a generator powered food, is it plugged in and powered by a power pole?
Well, they have power, they use generators, there's different ones, they do have power there that would be available, is that correct? The food truck could, if that's a restriction that they want to put on it, but it's a commercial, they operate hand tools, it's a tire shop, and they're using impact wrenches and other things all day long there.
Yeah.
And they stay open, I've been by there to inspect the property, and they're there at 6 or 7 o'clock, particularly now that it's hot, they're working later in the evening, so that's there already, those things are running, so. That would restrict us, but we're certainly, like I said, we only intended to have for one, could rotate, and 10 o'clock I think is very reasonable. It may not even be that late, but so.
I think those concerns satisfy any concern I would have.
Yeah, me too.
Do we have the ability to make it to where they have to use power and not a generator? Because 10 o'clock at night with a generator droning on and on and on and on and on is loud, so they have the ability to plug into the building to operate their food truck, any food truck that gets there, not just this one, but a block away with a generator blasting in your bedroom window.
That kind of hamstrings us a little bit. If the whole commission feels that way, I certainly understand. We're asking for something here. I think that restricts us. They've got new generators now that are very quiet, and it's going to be on the 59th Street side. They're not going to, put it by the neighborhood. There's the building between. Like I said, I've been over there. There's a commercial building just to the north, to the west of there.
Yeah, it's a Cox Communication Data Center. But all they have is a creek between them and a generator, and you said they make quiet generators, but does the applicant have one of those generators?
That's the question. So then I think the solution to that, Commissioner Hinkle, is just limit the hours of operation even further. You know, is to say, okay, instead of 10 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock.
Well, and let me say, to the point of do they have a quiet generator? They're going to be rotating food trucks.
Yeah, I'd say,
From one to another, they may have a loud one and a quiet one. So I'm really curious if they think they can have the tire shop provide the power.
Well, if they're
That's
gonna
be a big
have a deal with the tire shop to park their truck there, having an extension cord run out to the truck shouldn't be that big a deal.
And that's where I was going. It seems logical that that would be the solution.
Well,
I don't know how
understand
food
it's the
trucks
same
work,
owners,
so.
too. Same owners, right, Mr. Nice?
Well, but if they're gonna
my
rotate
client says they're willing to
trucks.
provide power that way, if that's,
So then
Right,
what
but they
would we
own the
need to
tire
write
shop.
into the SPUD then to effectuate this? That we would ban
The use of
the use
generators
of
for power.
generators?
As a power source, I think that's right.
Is that
I'm
something?
sorry, I didn't hear it.
Would you be agreeable to banning the use of generators if we were to approve of this as PUD, limited to hours of operation to no later than 10 p.m., and then no generators?
Yeah. Well, I will say no generators for the food truck. I
For the
can't
food
limit
truck.
that to the commercial use. They may need a generator for their business, they may lose power or something like that. I think they certainly have a right to use a generator
Sure.
in the
Yeah,
business they have.
Yeah, we would limit
No,
it to
the
the food truck.
generators
Okay.
specifically for the food truck use.
Yeah, I want to be
And,
clear on that, yeah.
I mean, I office there, I'm right down the street, I see that every day, so, and flats fix there every
Yeah.
week, so. Well, it's close and convenient, so.
So the applicant is amenable to that?
Yeah, I mean, they're willing,
Cool.
they're willing to do that then. Yeah.
Any further discussion from commissioners? I think we're ready for, I think there's consensus.
I have
so-
one question.
Go ahead, Commissioner
We're
Clare.
limiting end hours to 10 p.m. What about start hours?
Yeah.
What, do you have a?
11 p.m.
10:01.
They're there for breakfast, I mean, I
That's-
see
that's
that
what I
all
was
the
expecting
time.
was
I mean, we're not gonna
that-
be
that
at 4 or
breakfast-
5 in the
that-
morning. but,
yeah.
We don't want to limit that. We may have a food truck that's there that wants to be there for the breakfast and the lunch hours and then leave, or one that want to be. So I hate to restrict us that. to
6
that.
a.m. to 10 p.m.? 6 a.m. to 10
Okay,
p.m.?
yeah, that
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm ready for a motion if we've heard from everybody.
Please proceed, Commissioner Privet.
I would recommend approval of SPUD 1434 with the following restrictions. Hours of operation, 6 to 10 p.m. No generators to be used for the food truck.
Just to be clear, Commissioner Privet, 6 a.m.
6
to
a.m.
10 p.m. would be the limit of the hours of
Yeah,
operation.
yeah. Sorry. And only one truck per instance. So we're only one truck.
Limited to one food truck, limit the hours of operation from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Correct.
And that the food trucks would not be allowed to use a generator.
Right.
Is that sufficient, Commissioners?
Yes, we need to be clear, one food truck at a time, not just one.
Yes.
Yeah.
One food truck at a time.
On property at a time.
On property at a time. It's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Fraley votes yes. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're ready for item 10.
This is SPUD 1425, application to rezone 928 Northwest 107th Street from R1, R4, and C3.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Pat Garrett, who's also here with us. This is an application that would convert what is a mixture of C3, R4, and R1 to a light industrial development. These have become very popular, think kind of office warehouse, so small users like electricians, plumbers, things like that. The area is fairly interesting. You've got heavier industrial to the east. You've got some very dated residential units that exist around it, and some convenience type stores that exist along the frontage. So we believe the uses that we have included in here to be compatible with the area, consistent with what you're seeing in the area, specifically what's happening to the east of our site. 3 TEs, we agree with TE 1 and 2. TE 3, we would ask to modify it access to state may be taken from Northwestern Avenue, Northwest 107th, and Northwest 105th. So the only thing we're seeking to change is the word will to may and add Northwest 107th after Northwestern Avenue. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is my ward, and so my question is, can you tell me about the nearby, are the residences on the south side looking like it's on 105th Street? Are they currently in use as residences?
Are those residents? Yeah, there are rentals in there.
They're rentals?
Yes, sir.
And so the base zoning then would put some requirements as far, or let me make sure that I'm clear about the setbacks and the screening. Sorry if that's my own microphone.
Yeah, so we don't seek any variance to that. So the code will put upon us screening requirements.
With the base zoning?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I-1 next to residential would require screening.
Excellent. I don't think I have any questions. Questions from commissioners? Any questions from commissioners? Any questions from the audience?
I have one question, sorry. Is it right that part of this is extending down in between the apartments? Am I looking at that right?
Yes.
The dotted lines?
That would perhaps be an access point. He owns, everything in yellow is what is owned by the applicant.
Okay.
So that would allow for the ability to have access down to 105th Street.
Okay. Should it be limited to access? What if a light industrial building was built there? Would we have a problem with that right in the middle of the what I think is apartments or next to them? I guess it's a convenience store on one side and an apartment on the other.
We could limit that tract to access. What is shown on there as M, we could agree in the SPUD that that would be limited to access and not an individual building.
I think that'd be good because I don't know what might end up in there.
Yeah,
So,
we're fine with that.
Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone else wanting to be heard on this item from the audience? Can I hear from staff about Mr. Box's recommended amendments to TE3? Any thoughts on that?
No issues with that.
No issues with that? Mr. Box, would you mind giving us the language?
So what we're seeking to do is simply change the word will to may, and then add Northwest 107th Street after Northwestern Avenue. So it would read, access may be taken from Northwestern Avenue, comma, Northwest 107th Street, comma, and then the rest as it's written.
Would you also give us the language for TE4 modifying the use of Lot M?
Yeah, so what we could do is just reference that this particular exhibit, what is designated as Lot M, will be limited to access and no site development with buildings.
Any thoughts from staff on that? Thank you.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Clare.
Is it the applicant's intent to improve Francis Avenue?
No.
No, okay.
The next item on the docket, we'll talk about that.
I would request that, I don't know, my concern is you're reserving tract M for access, but you also now have the ability by using North 105th to come all the way down 105th to Francis and back in the backside. Apartments, there's not a lot of places for kids to play. They're going to play in the street. I have some concerns about introducing that traffic with that potential access on the backside.
So the access from 105th will be to the west, to Western. Francis is frankly a unimproved street. It says improved, but if you've been out there, it is not a street like you believe a street exists. To the north of that, which is the next case, has never been improved. It is treed and frankly probably operates more as a place for trash to collect than any sort of street. Okay. So any traffic that goes to 105th will be going south and then west along that gas station to Western Avenue.
So then could we further amend TE3 that when referring to 105th Street, that it's specifically from tract M to Western Avenue.
Tract M's access is to allow access from the subject site to Western Avenue. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you're using Tract M for access, correct, to 105th Street?
Correct.
So I'm saying that you're requesting access when you say and Northwest 107th and Northwest 105th Street, that you limit that access on 105th Street from Tract M to Western Avenue. I'm trying to limit.
Yeah. We could say that from Tract M to 105th, it's right turn only, which forces.
The other option would be to affirmatively state that you will not take access to this site from Francis Avenue.
Yeah.
From what?
Francis Avenue.
So we're doing that with the next application. So yeah, we agree to not take access from Francis Avenue.
Okay.
So that's TE5,
Well, it's just the next item.
right? So I think we're ready for a motion. And seeing as it's my award, I cannot make that motion.
I'll try to make the motion. I think I kept up. Make a motion to approve CE 1080.
Oh.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, I got it in the wrong hand. There you go. SPUD 1425. Is that the right one? Yeah. Subject to now 4 TEs, the third one modified from will to may, inserting and Northwest 107th Street right before and Northwest 105th, and adding TE4 to limit the use designated as Section M in the exhibit to access only and no site development of buildings. And do we still want to say right turn only or not?
Say right turn only.
And right turn only. If you're going south, right turn only.
Excellent. Commissioner LaForge has made the motion to recommend approval of SPUD 1425 to City Council with the amendments as read into the record. It's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're now ready for item 11, and before we dive in to item 11, let's separate this conversation. Let's deal with all issues not regarding TE1 first. So if you could just describe any of those issues, let's hear from the commission, let's develop consensus, then let's move to dealing with the issues of TE1. Does that work for the commission? Excellent. Go ahead, Mr. Fox. And after we introduce the item, sorry. I got ahead of myself.
Sure, CE 1080, application to close Northwest 106th Street from Northwestern Avenue and North Francis Avenue and portions of the alleyway in Block 7 and Block 6 of the Homedale addition located at 928 Northwest 107th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I'm going to take TEs 1 and 2 as the same, so I'm going to talk about everything else first. So this is a companion item to what you just saw. It is a closing action to close and ultimately file a vacation action on the streets that you see hashed in red. We would ask to delete TE3 in that it asks us to eliminate the west half of Francis Avenue. Francis has never been opened, it never will be opened, and so we do intend to vacate that west half of Francis because we don't intend to use it, and I think that frankly goes along with what Commissioner Claire was asking in the previous item. So we would ask to strike TE number 3.
What's your main objective for doing that?
We don't want to provide access from Francis. Francis has never been improved coming south from Hefner. Frankly, the level of improvement is probably generous to say improvement, and the industrial folks on the east half of Francis have no intention of opening that up. That's their kind of back of operation. So for all intents and purposes, Francis will never be operational as a public street.
Can we hear from anything else, Mr. Box? Can we hear from staff about eliminating TE3?
Yeah, so Francis Avenue, so on 105th Street where it tees into Francis Avenue, decades ago, that was required of them to build a half street. We have not since required Looks like there's been one development, those storage units closer to Hefner Road, where we did not require a half street. We don't make a practice of doing that these days. So the result has been that we don't have an improved street there. The concern that staff has is that Francis Avenue could provide, and if it were improved, access to some empty land there further south. If you were to go straight through on 105th Street, there could be provided some access there, as well as this, what looks like it could be an extension of that storage unit property. So I think it's too strong of a statement to say it'll never be used. It certainly will never be used if this if this easement is closed. But it could be a viable street, and it was originally designed, well, designed may be too strong of a word, but that road provides access, or could provide access to other properties that are not in control of this property owner.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding completely your position. You want to make sure that we keep half the street in case we provide, so that it's available to provide potentially access to those properties that the applicant does not own to the east. Is that the concern?
They're proposing to close the western half of the street, which, for all intents and purposes, when you do that, you are foreclosing forevermore the opportunity to have an actual street there. And so staff recommends against that. We feel like that should remain open. They don't have to take access from Francis. They don't even have to improve Francis. I think what their desire is to have additional area for the site.
So to not close it, I think does exactly what Commissioner Clare is worried about. The only traffic that would operate along Francis would be industrial style traffic up against those residential. Based upon the manner in which the sites to our east have developed, it is a virtual certainty that Francis will never develop. So it will just be a strip of public right-of-way that, frankly, my client will have to then go mow and maintain, because it will not be a street. It just won't.
Any other thoughts from commissioners on this?
Does the vacation just have to go as far north as it's shown?
So those are the limits of what we own.
Okay.
Can staff answer if the property's to the east? Presumably the other half of the street is still an existing easement. That has not been closed in the past, right? Yeah.
Dustin Stiggraves with the Utilities Department. I just want you to let you be aware that we do have a sewer line going down Francis Street. So we do need to retain access to that, so they cannot build anything on that half if they do close it, because we will need access to our sewer line unless they reroute the sewer line. So I just want you to be aware of that.
But the city would retain its rights regardless of whether we keep TE3 or not.
That is true, yes. If they want to build something over the top of it, then they would have to reroute it.
We understand that. That's standard.
I think as I'm looking over here, but I'm open if I'm not.
I'm not sure I'm understanding if you can't build on it and there's a sewer line there.
You can build on it. You can't build a structure. You could build parking. You could build other things. We could also pay to reroute the sewer line.
Yeah.
So it provides us more opportunities and more potential site design elements in that.
Staff says something.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Craig Heath, City Attorney's Office. No, he would not be able to build parking over the sewer line.
With coordination with the Utilities Department, we can find ways to utilize that site that otherwise we can't if it's still a public right-of-way. It may require Mr. Garrett pay money to relocate, but it provides more options if it is closed and ultimately vacated that otherwise don't exist today.
Any response to that statement?
No, I have no problem with the applicant cooperating with the Utilities Department. I just object to the idea that structures can be built over the sewer line without the condition of that cooperation and that relocation.
Gotcha. Is there consensus on on TE3? I think that there is, looking at everyone here. then are we ready to have fun with TE 1 and 2, to a lesser extent, TE 2?
Well, yeah, we might as well move on, 'cause
Yeah.
we've got other things to worry about.
Okay, for the sake of framing this conversation one more time, the question for the commission, we're going to hear the legal analysis from everyone, from the applicant, from the municipal counselor, but the question for us is, do we move forward with imposing TEs 1 and 2 as is on the applicant for the reasons that the municipal counselor will state? Do we eliminate TE 1 or TE 2 or both? Or do we defer the item and let there be further discussion between the applicant, the development community, and the municipal counselor's office as far as their concerns? So that's really our choices at this point. So I just think that's a good backdrop to the discussion. So that we can respect the commission's time, we're going to give Mr. Box 5 minutes. We'll give the municipal counselor's office Mr. Keith 5 minutes. We're going to let the commission then ask you all questions. We'll hear from the audience, and then we're going to bring it back to the commission for us to have this discussion. Mr. Box, for
Yes,
5
sir.
minutes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think you actually hit the nail on the head in the previous item when you asked if the rights already exist and are not changed, then why do we need a TE? If we think about what a TE does, a TE is an action item, right? We're limiting heights, we're limiting hours, we're limiting setbacks, we're adding screening, we're doing those things. The purpose of a TE is not to put the public on notice. The public is on notice because these rights already exist. Nothing about this TE changes it. For those of us in the room that have done these types of actions, which I believe are limited to perhaps Ms. Powers and I on this side of the room, nothing about the closing action does anything with the city's rights. What happens after we get through city council is we have to file a lawsuit in district court. It is us as the plaintiff, and the defendants are all of the franchise holders. So OG&E, ONG, Cox, AT&T, anyone that is a franchise holder. Notably, the other defendant in that lawsuit is the city of Oklahoma City, through the municipal counselor's office, who file either an objection or I guess they could waive or whatever they do, but they are actively engaged. And the only thing that takes the rights away is the vacation. So the idea that they need a TE to put us on notice is just absolutely flawed thinking, because they're going to have the opportunity to file formal pleadings with the court if they're not convinced that what we are doing is proper or what we are doing is somehow going to impact their ability to provide infrastructure within the area that we seek to vacate. So, because of that, the TE serves no purpose. It is a redundant thing that, for the first time I'm hearing, was intended to put us on notice. Well, that is not what we are intended to do with technical evaluations. The other thing that I've heard is that somehow the city at some point made a mistake and had to go buy right-of-way that had otherwise been theirs, and they didn't want to have to buy it again. Well, that doesn't happen in the closing. That happened because somebody failed to properly file a pleading in the vacation action at district court. City council can close, you can recommend a closing. The city would only be in a position of having to buy back right-of-way if they let it slip in a vacation action at district court. Nothing about the closing can do that. The only thing the closing does is just that. It closes it to public use. It doesn't give my client the right to do anything within that. He doesn't own title clear to it until he goes to the courthouse and a district court judge, through a journal entry of judgment, grants us those rights. And so what will happen is when the notice of the petition gets sent to everybody, some companies will file reservations saying we have infrastructure in there and therefore we reserve our rights within that area. When that happens, my client is forced to say okay or pay the money to move the facilities. The city has the same ability. We have sewer line, we have water line, we have some infrastructure in there. We reserve our easement, in which time we say, okay, the only way that we can get out of the reservation of that easement is if we agree to pay the money to move it. So the city is actively involved. With all respect to this commission and all respect to the city council, they have no legal authority to change anything about the rights that the city has. The district court is the only group that can do that. So by including this technical evaluation, I'll stand here and say, I'm on notice. We don't need this, because the city council, through their attorney, is going to be able to tell us at the district court stage what they have in there and what reservations may or may not be needed. This TE is new policy that I am still trying to figure out what was the issue, what was the concern that caused this to happen when closings have happened in the same manner for decades. Now, what we're told here is that it's reserved until such time as plans have been approved. Well, developers, landowners, they can't really plan until they know what their buildable area is. That's why at the vacation action, not plan stage, but the vacation action, we hash all these things out. That's when every franchise holder in the city are at the same table through that petition to say what we have or don't have, and then the developer's in a position of figuring out what can be built upon, where things need to go, and what these journal entries oftentimes look like is a series of waivers saying we have no infrastructure in there, or we have all of these and therefore we demand a reservation. That's how these work. Reservations happen in these every single time, and that's no different here than before this TE existed.
Thank you. I do have a question, and I want to bring the commission back to a parallel similar. I'm wondering if there's, and let me get the whole explanation out before. I'm wondering if there's a gotcha moment here. And I want to bring the commission back to some of us who've been here for a little bit. We would have these issues between the preliminary plat stage and the final plat stage, in which we would say we want to wait and see when we get to the final plat if we can resolve this issue. Let's say it's traffic circulation. And Mr. Box would stand up before us and we'd say, we want to address this issue about traffic circulation. And it'd be the preliminary plat. And it would be, well, it's not the final plat, so we're going to hear about it later. So then we get to the final plat, and then it'd be, well, we're entirely conforming with the preliminary plat. You don't have any legal authority to impose any new standards that you didn't impose at the preliminary plat stage. So then we got smart and started saying, okay, well then we're going to specifically say we want to review these issues at the final plat stage. And that stopped this sort of gotcha kind of deal. I'm wondering if you can tell us if by refusing to implement TE1, we are putting the city, and I'm sure that the municipal council will have his own response to this, are we putting the city in a position to where they don't have any legs to stand on, where it's a gotcha with their rights as far as the easements or protecting any future uses with this easement by refusing to make any clarifications at this stage? And that's maybe a very ignorant question because I've not participated in any vacation action, but I'm just wondering if this is a very similar issue.
So it's
Okay.
great.
I can unequivocally answer that question.
Great.
Any franchisee or owner of utilities, like the city, that has facilities in place has an absolute right to maintain them, period. That's why when you go over to district court, you either tell them there aren't any or the easement or whatever is needed is being reserved. Those are the only two options. There aren't any or they're being reserved. If you go over there and say, there aren't any, but there really are, and the vacation action is, journal entry is entered, what it will say is, there aren't any. Therefore, it's being vacated. If it turns out later that was not correct, then the vacation journal entry is not valid, right? So no, there isn't any way to accidentally or wink, wink, nudge, nudge foreclose the rights of any franchisee or owner of facilities in place. What I'm curious about, having done a few of these, is what would happen if the city answered a vacation action after having closed something by saying, well, no, we don't have any in place, but we think maybe someday we might want to, so therefore we object to the vacation. I think the district court judge would just laugh them out of the courtroom. And part of my objection to this perpetual easement being reserved for something we think maybe we might need later, that's a big problem for me.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Box from the commission?
I'm going to have a question. Instead of going back to Mr. Box's, just to make sure the city answers this, specific words that are in the TE, that it is hereby expressly reserved. My question is going to be, without that, is it nonetheless reserved? It's just not expressed here? It's sort of to Mr. Box's point. So if you would, when you respond, talk about that language that we're looking at here, are hereby expressly reserved.
So the question, that is very much to my point. What you don't have to reserve is the right to remain things that are in place. What they're seeking, it seems like to me, unless I'm reading this very wrong, is the right to reserve something that they don't have in place, but that they think they might need later. And that's why it says
Which would
hereby.
be, to get to the words right, hereby. Hereby is saying, except for this, it would not be reserved. And so my question is if that is true, is if this is what is reserving or whether it would be reserved anyway without this.
And the answer to the question is between whether there are facilities in place or whether it's just something you might want to have at some point later.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Box. I think we're ready to hear 5 minutes from Mr. Keith.
So I think the gotcha analogy was just perfectly on the nose, because this actually has been in place for a year, and it was created by and through Mr. Box, coming to us and saying, the Planning Commission didn't reserve this in their TEs. Therefore, you cannot include it in your ordinance going to City Council. Mr. Box caused this TE to be created just for that gotcha reason. So we said, fine, even though the statute, as Commissioner Powers says we have that right, we put it in there. So we didn't have to argue to the council that you're acting differently than the Planning Commission. And that's why I framed it earlier as a notice, because I agree with Commissioner Powers, the right is there, and the right is in the statute. Right? This is to keep from having continuous fights with Mr. Box's clients through the City Council ordinance process, through the vacation process, because then Mr. Lefevre comes in and says, well, anything you didn't specifically reserve in the ordinance or in the Planning Commission, you're not getting vacation, I'm going to take you to the judge, whether there's a line there or not. Sometimes we don't know whether or not we need a line there because we don't have plans. Often, as a new TE number 2, we don't have a survey. In this case, we do not have a survey. So it's very hard to evaluate what we need now or need in the future when there's no survey. We do not have a plan for how it's going to be developed. Now, this is an ongoing process. Yes, they don't want to develop their plan too much before they know if they have the opportunity. On the other hand, the city cannot evaluate what is needed in the future without a plan. Often, we've had to argue with the attorney and with the engineer. Says, well, we decide we don't want to extend the sewer line, even though we're doing away with the one that goes through the middle of the land, because it's too expensive, and you can't make us do it. And normally we say, well, fine, then the sewer line that's there stays. So, no, you already gave that up. All right? But now I decided, I changed my plans. I'm not building the sewer line to replace the one that's removed. Gotcha. So we wanted to avoid the gotcha. So we put in the language in here that made it clear to everybody this is reserved, so that when we have approved plans, and actually it should be when the replacement facilities are put in, we're being very generous in the approved plans because that assumes it's going to be built, that things will be released. That is how we got to where we are. One of the interesting things is one of the future challenges is, as Commissioner Janice Powers pointed out, is sometimes it's flooding related and stormwater related, and we don't have facilities there now, but we don't know until they develop their facilities which way the water is going to be redirected and run, which may not be a problem for the applicant, but maybe a problem for the adjoining property owners. And we've had numerous situations where the developer went in and put in their roads or whatever and caused backup of water, pooling of water and flooding in the adjacent developed subdivisions. And we get calls by the residents saying, what are you going to do about this? Well, now we're in a position where we have to go buy easement, possibly from the person who caused the backup. We've had a couple with Mr. Box where we had to extend a stormwater line where his client wanted $100,000 for less than 100 square feet of easement. But it was a necessity, and people were flooding, and we needed to do something. So there is some unknown because there is an exchange. It's an ongoing, it's not a known process. Now, we would like to move some of these issues to earlier on in the process so it'd be more clear for you. So we have the survey along with the application and maybe even some preliminary plans so we know a little bit more how to evaluate current use and future needs before it gets to you. And we can give you better information and you can make the best decision you can make. And that's all great. But then we'll hear from Mr. Box, well, now you're requiring the survey ahead of time, and that's not fair. My client has to put out money. Well, we cannot act without the information. You can't both tell us we can't have the information, but we're responsible for acting. That's the catch-22, the gotcha that the city is in. That's how we got here.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Let's make sure we hear questions from the commission first. Commissioners, any thoughts? And I do have a question. What's stopping, suppose this language doesn't exist as it hasn't existed in the years prior to last year, or, what's stopping the city from requesting a reservation of these rights with the judge when the vacation action is taking place? What stops that?
Nothing stops that, and we can do that. We just want you to be aware that the council member that you represent comes to us and say, well, why wasn't this addressed at the Planning Commission? We'll say, because there is a policy that says, since it's there by statute, it's not necessary for the Planning Commission to make a opine on that issue. We just want everybody to be on the same page. We can deal with, yes, we will deal with it at the City Council ordinance section. We just want everybody to be on the same page because city staff and clients get caught in the middle. So long as we know what your intentions are, we can deal with it, but we just want to be on the same page.
I have an additional question. Please. Are these, this is not in every single application, so are these being used sparingly and only in a unique circumstance to where you think this needs to be on it? Or is it just that everyone like this and the nature of this, they're on them? Meaning, however many matters we had today, this is on like 3. So why was it not on every item? And I think there's a good reason.
Just for the easement closings, right?
They are now on every easement closing.
They're just for the CEs and not for the PUDs and the other and SPUDs and the like. It's just for the CEs.
Okay. Okay, and then to narrow that, and therefore it is every one of those, not just the ones we think there's a particular reason we might need it. It's just every one of those blanket, right? Which is fine if that's what it is. Okay, those types of applications, we're putting it on everyone. Okay.
As an ALTA survey, are they performed on? They're performed on these sites, right? Not unless they're requested.
Right. No, I mean they're, as you know, they're expensive. It requires a tremendous amount of upfront effort and costs. When again there is a tremendous amount of unknown. I absolutely resent the comment from council that somehow I am the one that is somehow, creating some sort of gotcha moment. When, of course, the city attorney's office files an entry of appearance and is actively engaged in that litigation. So the idea that this TE provides an avenue of gotcha is just absolutely incorrect. And again, the idea that I have created this problem is frankly quite hilarious.
It wouldn't be the first time.
But I mean, we don't have plans, right? Like that's not uncommon. And council acts like this happens in a vacuum when, of course, public works utilities have the absolute right to tell us where things need to go. And that happens all the time. We get calls complaining all the time about drainage requirements, location of sewer, location of water, having to loop the system because that costs money. Just because we say, hey, we vacated, here's our building, we're going to run it how we want. Well, no, the city still has the right to make us drag it to the opposite corner so that the next guy doesn't have to come and buy an easement, that it's at our far corner. That's the most, I think, obvious thing that we see often, right? If you have this long tract, you'd like to just stop it where you need to stop it. Well, then the next person would have to come buy easement. Well, we don't do that because the city, just in their normal process of approving plans, requires us to drag sewer past the point where we need, but to the opposite end of our property so the next person can hook on. That just happens normally, whether there's a vacation or not. So the idea that the vacation somehow allows some sort of gotcha, and it's me personally, is just an absolute fallacy.
It's,
Just to get personalities out of it, if you can. What I think I heard Mr. Buck say was that he's perfectly all right with us deleting it, as long as we all understand that when they go to district court, we haven't affected their right by permitting it to be closed.
okay. So have we just resolved this issue then?
Accurate?
That is correct.
Well, is the problem, though, there's a lot of different district judges. Some of them would know this, some would not. And there's a lot of different city councilmen. How does this become a blanket? We could say that here today, but what district judge is not going to know that?
There's
was
not a
already the
district
risk.
judge that's not going to know that. It's the vacation statutes are very clear.
But how do they know what he's mentioned? That then it's stated that, well, if the planning commission had wanted it reserved, they would have done it. And district judges could be led to believe that was true. Say, you know what, the story that I'm hearing here of what has happened seems like it could still happen.
He was talking about how city council views it. District judges don't care what we do. They only care what city council does.
Go ahead, I thought he said it differently.
They have the ability to file responsive pleadings saying, we have infrastructure. Here's the public works director, here's the utilities director, we'll put them on the stand. We have infrastructure in place, therefore we absolutely are entitled legally to reserve what we have.
So, sorry, if you would, I thought you said it was even at the judges, that the position was being taken even at court.
So the preferred process would be that when the petition gets filed for vacation, that everything had been worked out, that you knew what the plan was by the applicant, you knew that the survey was, you had all the information, and you could knowingly release certain issues. But that doesn't happen because Mr. Box does not represent the applicant at that stage. Mr. Paul Lefevre does, and he takes a different position. And he takes a position that if you didn't save it along the way, then he's not going to agree to a settled journal entry. Bring your client down here, have them explain to the judge why you have this easement, why you need this easement, and that's fine too if they want us to battle it out. But his partner does not agree with that philosophy, so we're constantly fighting at the time of the vacation with Mr. Lefevre from his firm.
But again, so now we're talking about.
But that doesn't change the standards that the judge would use in reaching the final conclusion, right? It shouldn't matter whether it's David's argument or Paul's argument. The rights of the city remain the same. It's still on the city to ensure that those rights are protected at the vacation stage in front of the judge. Am I misunderstanding that part of it?
No, you understand that the judge has the authority, except as to existing lines. The statute says that a vacation order does not change the rights of the utility where it has existing lines.
Susan also had a question too.
Can you hear me on this? Hello? Okay. I just wanted, by deleting this TE, are you trying to delete this language from the ordinance itself when it goes to council?
Of course not. What do you mean from the ordinance itself?
The ordinance that goes to council would have this language that we always, standard language that we have in it would be in our ordinance approved by council.
When we say standard, it's standard in the last 2 months that has routinely been struck by this commission. It's not standard language as
So you
existed.
are asking the council to strike it out of the ordinance, our closing ordinance,
Of course.
which then does delete our rights, because it's just
No.
a closing, which you're
It doesn't
trying.
delete your rights. Your rights exist by statute. And if you want rights reserved in things that you don't presently have, it seems reasonable that you explain to the judge why you want those rights.
I'm talking just about at the closing stage, because we have the right to reopen that at any point, and our ordinances forever have always reserved all those easements in our closing ordinance itself. So you seem to be wanting to delete that language out of our ordinance itself.
I'm asking to delete the TE. Let's go back to the way we did it a year ago. And if that language was in there, we're fine with that. This is new language. I think that's undisputable.
Okay, I'm sorry to jump in, and I appreciate this. You're okay with it still being in the ordinance?
Whatever was in the ordinance previously.
Whatever was previous. What I felt like you've been making a position on, Mr. Box, is that this language does nothing and it changes nothing. Maybe that's not what you said, but if this does nothing and changes nothing, please tell me then, why is this a problem? Maybe you already have, but what's the, verse it around, what is the problem with having this in here? If it's already in, if it's in the ordinance, if it's the district judge, all these things, what issue does this create if by being in here?
Because now they are going to be expressly reserving rights, some of which they don't even have, until such time as building plans have been approved by Public Works, right?
Some that they don't have. What do they not have? And I'm sorry if you've already answered it, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, think of Francis, okay? Let's go back to the aerial of Francis, if you don't mind. So what I would respond to your question with is a question. In that area of Francis that is full of trash, trees, grass, and perhaps some fences, can we identify any water or wastewater? Perhaps there's wastewater. Traffic control systems that exist, sidewalks that exist.
Wouldn't the survey, I mean, item TE2 is the one that makes sense to me, is if the survey's done and submitted with the application, then aren't all the facts on the table? And so my understanding is that is becoming a requirement. Maybe it wasn't at the time of this application.
And we'll deal with that. One of the problems is that is putting, I think, an unfair burden on applicants to go spend a bunch of money doing surveys at this phase. Because again, at the district court phase, we don't need a survey because everyone should know within reason what things they have within the rights of way and will either disclaim any interest or say we have infrastructure, therefore we reserve our rights.
I can understand that, but I can also see that if someone's asking for something from the city.
But what they're asking us
and
to
you have to have a survey to build a project anyway, typically, so
and I don't disagree.
Like an undue burden.
In theory, but let's think about what they're asking. We don't know what we have. Can you spend a bunch of money and tell us what our stuff is? That's what they're asking us to do.
Yeah.
So in theory, yeah, it sounds reasonable, but what they're saying is, we think we have some stuff. In fact, here, they know they do. But we don't want to spend our resources. Can you go spend your money to tell us what our stuff is and where it is on your site?
I think, any questions about this? Because I think where we are, and I am curious to Susan's point, is it an argument that can then be made at the vacation stage, at the closing stage, that it is an indicator of the city's intent by not including this language, even though the city's rights are established in state statute, which takes precedent over the ordinance, is eliminating this language, giving an indication of the city's intent to not honor those rights? Because I think that's what I was hearing from.
So again, it's this rights thing is getting a little fuzzy here. They have a right to access and maintain anything they have in place. What they're asking for here is a perpetual easement for something that they don't have, don't right now know they want, don't have any plan for, but maybe someday, who knows, they might want that. And at that point, they're not going to go buy it from you. You've already given them an easement for it. It is a blank check. That's the part of it that bothers me.
So what if we say that exists? What if we add a perpetual easement for all these things that currently exist?
Okay, because what Ms. Powers just said there, the word perpetual is a little scary. It does at least have an until such time as. Okay, till when? Plans have been approved by Public Works. If we had an unreasonable Public Works, we had a situation where they were refusing to approve plans because they wanted to truly perpetually hold this, that'd be a problem. But I don't think we don't have that. So does the limitation of this is just until plans have been approved, does that not help enough? I know, I'm sure you don't like it, but is that not reasonable?
It's not, in my opinion, for a lot of the reasons that Ms. Powers is stating. I mean, we're willing to have this TE, I guess, for infrastructure that the city has, whether they know about it or not. We're willing to say, well, this is acceptable for infrastructure that they currently have, known or unknown.
Mr. Govine?
I understand the developer's side of this because it does cost a significant amount of money to get plans to a point of even being able to get approved, which they won't be approved if if you've got a building in an easement. So that's why I'm still confused about that, having gone through that side of the process I understand that there's a good faith working together that has to go back and forth from utilities, and you get comments, but wouldn't we be in the same position at that point? Then utilities would say you have to get the easement abandoned to put your building there, and then you'd show up at that point after you've spent 200 or more thousand developing several buildings. That's my, I don't like that.
Could we briefly have, I'd ask Commissioner Powers, her idea of gathering more input. I feel like I've heard a lot, and I don't know exactly what the best is. I don't know that there's more information I could get, though. I've already got a lot. But how would it work if we gathered more information? There's 3 today. We've had some in the past couple months. What was your suggestion, or what would your suggestion be? How would we gather more input but also make progress?
Since this has come, to light in the last few weeks, I've been contacted by a number of members of the development community who I think would like the opportunity to sit down, not necessarily with us here in public meeting, with the city, with the staff, and figure out exactly what the problem is, exactly what the best fix for that problem is, and work out some way to deal with it. That I just think would be beneficial and more useful than us trying to hash this out like this. I'm really surprised that hasn't occurred. And I think I would like to do everything as a planning commissioner to encourage it to occur. And if that doesn't work out, then they can all come down here. We can either do a study session or some kind of quasi-public forum where they can come and give us the benefit of their experience and expertise. I'm just really, really troubled by wanting to change direction on something that's been working, as far as I know, just fine. If it hasn't been working just fine, that's news to me, and I would like to hear more about that.
So my take on this, just to kind of help us reach a clear conclusion. My vote would personally be delete TE1. I've asked Susan, I've asked the municipal counselor's office, provide us with a memo outlining the city's position, their rationale for the reason we need this language, and then let's schedule a meeting. Let's put 3 or 4 commissioners in the meeting with the development community, with the municipal counselor's office, commissioners. Let's meet in one room. Let's have one discussion about it. Then I would suggest we have a study session that is a public meeting where all commissioners can weigh in at that point with a clear conclusion. But from where I'm sitting, because it's a hard decision, and I've heard the municipal counselor's office, I heard from staff, they gave me a wonderful explanation. I feel like I just don't have enough information at this point, but I've appreciated how well they've done in articulating it so far. I just think it's unfair to hold the developer accountable for a position that we have waived. I've asked several times, am I mistaken? And every time Mr. Box has made this request to waive this, we've done it. So I'm of the position that we haven't harmed the city because every time he's asked for the last year, we've done it. So I think if there's consensus, and I want to know if there's consensus of that plan of action, delete TE1, get the memo from the city, have a meeting with a minority number of planning commissioners, with the development community, with city staff. Then let's have a study session, let's hear it out in a public forum, and then move forward with a clear policy, about how we want to move forward with this issue.
I think that's a great idea.
With the understanding that the Planning Commission is not making a statement as to what should or should not be in the ordinance, so that the city can include its standard ordinance to the city council, which reserves all rights.
Yes.
We don't make those kind of statements. Not up to us what's included in the ordinance.
Unless we have been doing it, this is where I do appreciate we get to the bottom of this. What the ordinance has said, if we don't include this TE, have we not been still including it in the ordinance?
Well, that's what I'd like to know, because all I'm asking to do is to go back the way that it's been happening for decades. This TE is brand new.
This TE is over a year old.
So do we know if the ordinance has still had similar language to this, even though it has not been the TE?
Has the ordinance changed?
I don't even think it It's up to us to decide that. We don't decide
I'd
what
still
goes
like to,
into the
I'd like to know
ordinances.
with respect to whether we're going to keep waiving these and for how long. I might waive today, but I might not even waive today. I might waive for 6 more months as long as it's in the ordinance is still some protection to his point.
But you know what would resolve that, Commissioner LaForge? A study session.
If
and a
we don't
meeting.
know today, I don't know, so whispering,
Yeah.
do we know the answer to that today? If we know the answer to that today, it helps me waive these 3 today if at least it's in there. Do we know? We don't know. Then, and that's fine if we don't. Then today, I'm with you guys waiving today, but by the next meeting, I'll be asking that again, and I don't want to just keep waiving them if it is a potential issue that he's raising.
And as I've said every time, I stand ready to meet. Mr. Lefever's name's been, used in vain here. I'll even bring him. Now, I think if you meet him, you would agree with me that he is not one likely to perform a gotcha move, despite what you've heard here today.
But regardless, where are we, Commissioners? We think we're ready for a motion.
I think so too.
And I believe the motion should be to recommend approval of CE with 1080 with the removal of TEs 1 and 3.
I'll make that motion.
Commissioner LaForge moves to recommend approval of CE 1080 with the removal of TEs 1 and 3.
I'm sorry.
No, 1 and 2.
And
1 and 2.
What,
Well, no, I thought we said
it
we
was
wanted to
all 3.
eliminate 3. All 3.
All 3. My motion is for all 3 to be removed, yeah.
Just for clarification, you're waiving the requirement to get a survey of what facilities are in the,
Yeah, I thought we, well, I thought we,
I would disagree with that. I thought that
oh, that's right.
I mean, we would, again.
you're asking for,
We'd ask for it to all be deleted, because this is a new requirement. And again, the franchise holders know what they have. Presumably, at the time that we file a district court action, the city knows what they have. So why are we going to provide a survey to show them what they have?
If I may, before I finalize my motion, Dan, I'm curious what you think about that.
I don't support removing TE2.
And why?
Because I think surveys should be provided with the application, and then that would avoid the whole issue.
Curious what the others think,
one.
and then I'll make the motion.
I believe the last time this came up, the survey was to be provided before the council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's what it said, that's what's
We
in
adjusted the language.
That was because the applicant was willing to do
Twisting their
that.
arm.
Yeah.
They were in the
Okay.
process of
This
doing
applicant's
that
not.
anyway, so. I mean, you got 6 weeks to provide a survey. Sometimes that can and can't be done, so.
I think let's see where the commission is. I mean, if the
Or,
motion,
to be friendly, I might just for a second ask the applicant if they'd rather continue this or make a motion to approve with the waiver of, with eliminating only 1 and 3 and keeping number 2,
No.
whichever you prefer.
yeah. Do we need to clarify the type of survey?
Well, so that,
Full Alta.
there is, no, and that's the problem, and thank you, Commissioner Privet. So the full Alta requires
That
title
gives you land
commitment.
title and everything.
We reached out to multiple title companies in town who said, we aren't in a position to want to issue title commitments on something this small. It would require a lot of time and effort, and it would go to the back list, because we're doing title commitments on land transactions. So providing a title commitment on think of it like a 5-foot alley. What title companies right now in this environment going to be willing to provide title commitments on a small little closing application?
Go ahead, Mr. Keith.
I believe that what is called for is a topographical survey with the precise location of the existing utilities that are in there, not an ALTA survey.
Okay, but to be clear, that's not what it says in the TE.
I did not write the TE, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Box, what would you think about that? We're being pretty compromising today, but at least that, maybe?
What if we provide the city's own GIS map?
It's not just the location of the city's assets in need there, because it's all relative. If the ONG line is directly over the sewer line, which it often is, it makes a difference as to how you evaluate the need for the line and whether it needs to be relocated and to where.
But again, then that happens at vacation. That happens at the vacation action when everybody comes to the table. They either disclaim interest or say, we reserve because we have infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we're just being pulled back to the same question of whether we take action now or later, whether the city still has its rights to argue before the judge about whether or not they want to protect those easements, those particular rights or not. And again, that still just takes us to a year ago We
Yeah.
didn't even have either one of these
I
requirements.
think that's why I was lumping them together, but Commissioner Govine, what do you think with all those issues, whether?
It sounds like we're back to square one on the, on that, so, okay, I'm
For
okay
this-
with your original
I'm going
motion.
with, for this time and the next time, we won't, we want to hear more and be a little more stringent on these, but my motion would be with the elimination of all 3 TEs, not even requiring a topographical survey, just eliminate all 3. We'll start tightening this up as we go if we don't get it all resolved on future applications.
The motion before the body is to recommend approval of CE 1080 with the removal of all 3 TEs. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
We're on item 14.
Item 14 is case SPUD 1429, application to rezone 325 Northwest 96th Street from R1 and SPUD 1080.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive.
Long time no see.
Here on behalf of the same applicant, Mr. Pat Garrett. This is a similar development in terms of uses and style and what is contemplated in terms of being light industrial. This one does have some TEs I'd like to address. Perhaps it would be easier to start with the ones that I agree to. So I do agree to TE 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I agree to if, and I want perhaps JJ to clarify, by agreeing to TE 8, are we still permitted to use architectural metal? Because I don't believe architectural metal to be, or maybe Jeff's the question, to be unfinished.
Yeah, architectural metal is, well,
Or maybe Dan, or maybe Commissioner Govine is the one to ask.
I've never been a fan of this requirement on any application.
Of eliminating metal?
I don't particularly support the TE about unfinished metal or metals.
Is that because you think it's a building material that is suitable to use?
Yes.
Okay.
I think in modern contemporary architecture, the metal, there's lots of appropriate metal cladding products that are available on the market, and every time we say that, it gets really confusing, and applicants have to prove this is not that, it's not the bad metal, it's the good metal, and I feel like we're splitting hairs. That said, I think we're not actually limiting the use of metal here. We're just saying, it just says unfinished metal. I'm looking at TE8, right?
Yeah, so that's
what
the
we're
question
talking
is,
about.
by saying unfinished metal isn't allowed, does that still allow a finished metal product? And I think to your point, that becomes problematic in the definition of, now, Commissioner Privet had the opportunity recently to hear me yammer on for about 45 minutes of the definition of finished versus unfinished. So we had that debate through an appeal of an administrative official. So my client's desire is to use a finished metal product.
Yeah, and I personally would support that and don't consider it an issue. I know there's probably differing opinions on that, but.
So we good from city's staff if we just eliminate that part of the sentence?
Just delete TE 5.
8.
Oh, 8, excuse me. Yeah.
Well, no, because we still want to address garage bays and service areas will not face south or north, right?
Just the reference to the metal then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a separate, we could go into a deeper discussion on what is unfinished metal. Is anodized aluminum finished or unfinished? I don't know.
JJ, isn't that, is that what it's called in the code? I thought it was, we referred to metal differently.
Yeah, that's the definition in the code.
Unfortunately,
Okay,
there is no
unfinished.
definition, as
Very gray.
Mr. Privet can attest after a lengthy hearing. It unfortunately doesn't. It just,
Yeah, and that's something that we've noted recently,
sheet
it was
metal
a couple
maybe?
months ago in another case that, there are a lot of metals that can and should be used and are being used and look great and function great, and something we need to clean up. So yeah, I mean, deleting that would probably be fine, and we could talk about it a little bit differently and specify that it should be architectural metal, but then there's no definition for that either. So
we'll keep
nice metal.
nice metal. Garage bays and service areas will not face north and south.
metal. Yeah.
Show me the metal, I'll tell you if it's all right.
Okay, so we're fine with the second half of the TE, that garage bays and service areas will not face north and south.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and hear the other.
So I've just confused everything about this. So let's just start at the top. TE1, we agree to the TE except for we want to keep the animal sales and services grooming. We think puppies getting haircuts is a good thing. And now, we did hear the last meeting, Ms. Welch talk, so if she has anything to add as it relates to that. But we're agreeable to removing the rest of the uses. TE2, we would like to modify to have a period at the end of west, so that it would read, building setback lines to require a 10-foot setback from the west. There's a 20-foot alley to the north already, so we think we have adequate setback there. Agree with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, modify 8 as we talked about. And then TE9 on the dumpsters, the manner in which this site is oriented, we don't really have the space to do that. It would put the dumpster squarely in the middle of where a building would be. However, we do have all of the screening requirements that you have come to expect as it relates to dumpsters in there. So the 50-foot setback from residential use is problematic here.
So what are you recommending?
Let me pull it out, show.
How far can you get?
Maybe pull up the site plan that has the actual footprint shown.
If we have it on the
There we
north
go.
line, it's got a 20-foot alley already there. And with masonry screening or screening requirements in the spud, we think it's okay.
I was just wondering if it will help any, 25 is what would be required by code.
Cool. So we're good. If we're good, to require more than 25 would be the question.
Okay. 25 feet from the property line.
Cool. Any comments from staff on the modification to TE2?
Could you clarify that again, David? I did have a question.
Yes, sir.
But
We would
period-
ask to modify it to read, building setback lines to require a 10-foot setback from the west, period.
Period, striking the rest.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
We have, you can see we have that.
But why was that? But you said because there was a
Was because the alley's
alley, but
proposed to be vacated, and the property line would then be the center of the alley.
Yeah. But so then we still, it's still the 20, on the, you're talking about on the setback. So what are you willing to do on the setback? So 10, we would ask then for a 10-foot
that's what it is.
on the north.
And that's what it is, right? That's what
Yeah,
it
that's what it
is.
says.
The difference would be the north spud boundary versus the north center. Are you going to the center of the alley?
We'll go to the center.
Are you measuring from center of the
Yeah.
alley? Your north spud boundary looks to be not the center of alley from the.
So can you give me the full reading of the sentence then, David?
We would, so we're already proposing the 10, so we would just say period after the end of west. So building setback lines to require 10-foot setback from the west.
But what we just discussed is, and the north.
I think it's already, I think that's what the spud already says from the north.
So we're going to leave it,
Yeah.
Okay.
leaves 2 as it's
So-
currently typed,
Well, we can add 10 to the north.
which is what it
Which is
started
what the
with.
TE already
I
says.
think you're back to the original number 2, because it was only 10 feet.
Pat, are you good with 10 on the north? Are you good with 10 on the north? Okay.
And
So
it's
we'll agree
okay
with
that-
as
With
written on
TE2.
TE2.
And it's okay that it references the spud boundaries. I'm not sure why it says the spud boundaries, but that's okay. The spud boundaries. I think you
was
might
wondering
want to
if
eliminate
that's a
spud
different-
boundaries, because if the boundary moves because of the alley
closing of the- yeah.
vacation.
The boundary won't move. The spud legal presented is the area that we are assuming will be vacated.
So you're okay saying spud boundaries, okay. So back to what it originally said in 2 is
Yeah,
okay.
so we'll agree with 2. So 1 we agree with, except we'd ask to keep grooming. We're good with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, modify 8 to keep the last portion of it. And delete, or on 9, 25 foot from property line.
Any questions of the applicant? This is Ward 7. I think we've gone pretty in-depth into the TEs, which were the issues. So I have no comments. Any questions for the applicant? Anyone from the audience wanting to be heard on this item? And I think we'd be in line for a motion that we would modify, as requested by the applicant, it would be to modify TE1 by eliminating from this TE use unit 8300.8. So to clarify, that would mean we are allowing this use unit. Then we would keep TEs 2 through 7 as is. We'd modify TE 8 to read, modify section 2.1 to say garage bays and service areas will not face south or north. Then we would modify, we don't even need TE 9 because the standard's already required 25 feet.
No,
Right?
Also just eliminate it?
Yeah, so we don't even need TE 9. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So that'd be the motion that we're needing.
As read.
As written. I think I'll take that as a motion from Commissioner Hinkle as stated. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes when available. The motion passes. We're on item 15.
Item 15 is an associated item, CE 1079, application to close part of the east-west alley in Block 4 of the Chester Hill addition and part of North Harvey Avenue between Northwest 96th Street and Northwest 97th Street.
Please spare us.
Bring it around again.
Do not want to go around again.
522 Colcord Drive. I'd like to take my 5 minutes.
We've gone down to 3.
Right.
We would ask to delete TEs 1 and 2.
So, shocker. Any questions from the applicant? Barry, for the safety of, for the sake of the commission.
I'm going to be real fast.
Please.
I'm just going to say
Safety.
that Public Works Engineering would still request that we keep the TE. For the record, I know we went through a long discussion, but I get that in the record that we still ask that TE remain in place.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the audience wishing to be heard on this item? Are there any questions, comments from commissioners? We're ready for a motion.
Quick question.
Please, Commissioner Clare.
Record, Public Works, you do not have any utilities in either of these easements currently.
I don't know the answer.
Dustin will need to speak to the utilities. I think there are some, but in looking at aerial photographs, Harvey Avenue is a paved open street, and so therefore we do have public infrastructure in there. And that's the part between 96th and 97th is paved.
Yeah, and perhaps I didn't, sorry.
Dustin Series Utilities Department, yes, we do have sanitary sewer in the proposed easement vacation.
And those would remain even if we eliminated TE1, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Barry.
I do need to, oh, sorry.
We're going to play musical microphones here. It is my understanding we have the street that is paved. If we go through this action and close that, that will close public access on Harvey Avenue between 96th and 97th, even though that is it is a improved infrastructure.
But the city would then have the ability to argue for the easement for the purposes of utilities.
Yes.
Would still remain, that right would still remain.
Not the public would
However,
not be able to drive a car down that
right,
street.
we're just not going to be able to drive a car on a currently paved road.
Road.
So we're closing public access where public access now exists.
And
No, I mean, you're talking about one block between 97th and you can't go north of 97th, you can't go south of 96th. So, I mean, it's
That's
really.
true.
Yeah.
But it is still a public street. It is
It
open.
is.
So
That we
And
can't,
it's
that the city
consistent with the
can't afford to
comprehensive plan,
maintain.
I believe, for us
It's
to keep.
gravel.
Yeah.
It's gravel.
I'm sorry, I'm
But yeah,
missing-
we were asked, I did not catch this. We do not intend to remove Harvey from the application. It doesn't exist going south. It's gravel through this stretch, and as Commissioner Clare said, it doesn't extend north. We don't think we're disrupting the block by doing this. The block has already been disrupted.
I'm missing something entirely on this. Sorry, who owns the property on which Harvey Avenue sits? That it's not owned by your client or any private party, is it?
It's a public street.
Yeah, it's a request to close that.
It's a public street.
So this are, oh, While this says to close part of the east-west alley, what you're actually doing is also closing Harvey.
Yes.
On both of it? We own both sides of Harvey.
But you don't, right?
We own
They don't
both
own the
sides of
street.
Harvey between 97th and 96th.
Okay. The opening of this said it was an application to close part of the east-west alley, but it is actually an
Yeah,
application
it
to
says.
close Harvey.
Yeah, and part of North Harvey. Yeah, we're closing Harvey.
And part of North Harvey, okay, but it's that entire block of Harvey, okay.
Correct.
Which again, if you look at the aerial, it's gravel, doesn't exist to the south, and it doesn't exist to the north.
Looked like it wanted to exist on the south at one time, but.
What's
I
that?
think that's why we have to take these individually. This is a
The
unique
south,
case,
it
just like.
For sure.
appears that they're using it as storage for broken down automobiles.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's even got an approach on it, so, yeah. Intended at one time.
There are residential structures.
Does the applicant have a statement on this?
Sorry?
Because it sounds like is there any reservation about closing Harvey? Sounds
Yeah.
like I'm hearing several
Yes.
commissioners that take issue
I
with
have a little
closing
bit.
Harvey.
Yeah, I have a
But
little
we're
bit.
okay with closing the alley.
Right.
We're not okay with closing Harvey. Is there consensus on that?
That's where I currently am.
I'm totally okay with closing Harvey.
And I,
You are or are not?
I totally am okay with closing Harvey.
as am I.
Well, I think it's appropriate for us to vote then.
So I will say, again, Harvey doesn't go anywhere. And yes, there are some residential structures to the west and a couple northeast, but Harvey's a gravel road that isn't maintained by the city, and it doesn't exist to the north and it doesn't exist to the south.
But it connects from 96 to 97th, right? I mean, it does go somewhere. It goes from 96 to 97th.
But there's,
It goes somewhere. If you're on 96 and you want to get to 97th, it takes you from there to there.
this used to be my ward, so I'm really familiar with this area. It really doesn't go anywhere. I mean, there are other ways to get any place you want to go out there that are real streets instead of what this is it's hard to even call it a road, frankly. Yes, it's a dedicated right-of-way, I understand that. But, it's not really maintained, it's not really used, it would really be a much more productive piece of property if it were returned to its owner, which the people who own the property on either side of it, in this case, the applicant, so that it could be developed. I'm not a big fan of closing things, but to me, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and maybe it's because I've driven the site, I've seen it, I understand it. So for me, as I know that this is my ward now, I'm perfectly okay with closing the street. But it's only because I've been there and seen it and seen the plans that I have that opinion. So
All right, you convinced me then, both of you. You know it better than I do. That's fine.
Yeah, I would defer to those judgments as well. I do think this is a bigger issue that we need to really keep our eyes on because, we got to think about the future of development and these right-of-ways and connectivity, and the grid is important.
Absolutely.
To maintain, because eventually, this will look very different than it does now. But that's all I have to say. Thanks.
If the applicant didn't own both sides of the property, I'd probably have a problem closing it, but I don't have a problem closing it.
I think that's a good point.
It's a decent
And
point,
there's
but
nowhere to
but not
go.
everywhere. But not everywhere. If I buy both sides of a street, that doesn't mean I get to close the street now. It has to be
Right.
unique to what you two are saying in this
Absolutely,
spot.
about this
looking at these
situation, because
pictures.
it doesn't go anywhere. Like that's the issue.
Right.
But we are also told there is sewer there, right?
Well,
We
the
did
easement's a
confirm
different
that, right?
question, though.
Yeah, and they will have, Pat will either pay to relocate, or they will have an easement that will retain their rights. And access to work on it, for sure.
Is there a motion, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of item CE 1079, deleting,
Eliminating TEs 1 and 2?
yes, eliminating TEs 1 and 2.
Motion is to recommend approval of CE 1079, removing TEs 1 and 2. It's been moved by Commissioner Clare, seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. The motion passes. Thank you. We're now in line to the election of the planning.
Item 6.
Oh, that's right, we got to go back. I'm so sorry.
Last but not least.
Item 6. You're back.
You're going to require the perpetual easement now.
Yeah. I think we've heard the arguments here, so I think we're in agreement. You're okay with the survey, though?
We've already provided it. But
You've already provided
if you
it.
wanna
So we
strike
really
both,
just
we'll
need,
take that.
we need a motion to approve without TE1.
Actually, before we do that.
Please,
I actually have a question.
please.
I heard somebody, maybe it's been Mr. Bass, make the comment that site triangles are no longer a thing in downtown. And that's news to me. My question about this particular application was all about the site triangles, that I assume that we have made a determination that this closure will not result in any kind of problem with site triangles. And please, if I'm wrong, tell me if site triangles are no longer a thing downtown.
So for the first part of it, yes, there's no problem with the site triangles based on where the stop bar is and all of that we've looked at. I don't see traffic out here. But as far as the downtown issue, JJ, are you?
I believe that the downtown zoning ordinance, I believe, gives the Public Works Director the authority to waive site triangles downtown because we're trying to get that mass and push buildings up to the corner.
But
So,
when we do that, we like to make sure that cars can actually see where
oh,
they're
absolutely.
going.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, they still measure the line of sight from the curb line, not just the property line.
Go ahead, Dustin.
Dustin Seagraves, Utilities Department. I just want to make on record that there is a private utility in the easement, the vacated, but it is the property owner. So I just wanted to make sure that was for the record, because previously they were saying that there was no private easement or private utilities there.
Cool. Barry, do we need to have you make a statement on the record?
The only thing that I want to add, and it's just on the site triangle, that this was submitted to traffic, and I'm repeating what they had said in an email that went to Mr. Bass earlier, that due to the distance from the curb to the street to the property line, that they were okay with that. Not that they were saying that we don't need site triangles anywhere in the downtown area, but it was kind of specific to this location because of some of the distances that occurred.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item? Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I believe we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval to the City Council of CE 1078 with removal of TE1, and we can retain TE2 since that's been done, I believe.
Excellent. The motion before the body is to recommend approval of CE 1078 and with the elimination of TE1. Is there a second?
Oh.
All good.
Have to hit the
Seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes when available. The motion passes. Thank you for your patience. We're now in line for the final item, the election of the Planning Commission Vice Chair. I'll recognize Commissioner Powers.
Oh, I just, although I was very honored by being drafted to be vice chair, I really am. I really think that that the position of vice chair is kind of a learning position, and it's because of the process that Chairman Cravens implemented of having someone always ready on point with all of the P's and Q's. That's not me. I'm not good at that. But also, I think the person who is our vice chair should be moving toward the chair. And based on the fact that I know neither Commissioner Hinkle nor nor Commissioner Privet are anxious to have that responsibility, and based just on the tenure of other, and I know Mr. LaForge very often cannot be with us for whole meetings at a time, so I would really gracefully like to surrender my place as vice chair and nominate Commissioner Clare.
So Commissioner Powers has resigned as a vice chair, leaving the office of vice chair of the Planning Commission vacant. She has also nominated Commissioner Clare, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Privet seconds. I think we're ready for a vote. Excuse me, is there a discussion?
Somebody asked Nate anything.
Thank you for asking. No, I am happy to serve in that.
I did ask him first.
Okay, yeah. And I knew that, and I realized we never actually asked. Commissioner Clare, would you like to be nominated for this position before we vote?
I am happy to serve in
It
that
sounds like we
position.
were gonna put you on the spot, whether you wanted it or not.
Yeah,
So,
if he hadn't shown up today, I would have done it anyway.
and I would have voted yes anyway. Please cast your votes when available. And that motion passes. Congratulations, Commissioner Clare.
Thank you, thank you.
Wonderful. We are now on, there are no additional items. We are on to communication and reports, Planning Commission committees. Any reports from Planning Commission committees? As my screen is fading away. I don't even have my agenda. Thank you. Planning Commission members? Anyone? Commissioner Clare? Powers? Fraley? Privet? Hinkle? Govine?
Nope.
LaForge? Wonderful. Planning Department?
Yes, a couple things. Speaking of committees, the Development Review Committee, with the departure of Asa Highsmith, we have a vacancy. Because I think it was Commissioner Hinkle, Commissioner Highsmith, and Commissioner Privet? Oh, Commissioner Clare, that's right. So we still have two. We just need an additional member.
Anyone interested?
I'm interested.
Commissioner Govine, do we need to vote on that?
Don't know if I'm qualified.
He has been hereby appointed by the chairman.
Who get
qualified? He has been appointed by the chairman as our final member of the Development Committee. Go ahead. Jeff.
The other thing I wanted to mention with that withdrawal of Special Permit 568, the city's intention is to resubmit that after we do some additional review of the building and some additional clarification. So
Is that the shelter?
you'll be seeing, yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Since you've said that, since you said that it's your intent to, on the one hand, when I looked at this, I thought, why, this is good stuff for a study session, I would think. On the one hand, my thought was, why aren't all of the gyms open as emergency shelters in times of need? And then on the other side, what would that really look like, and what would that mean, and what would be involved, and so on. And I'd love to hear more about this. If it would be appropriate for a study session, great. If not, I'd be glad to make time just to meet with whoever I can meet who'd be able to educate me about it. But we're really talking about a very few days out of the year when the weather gets super crazy. Maybe for heat as well as for cold?
It's really just always been for cold. Yeah, you're right. It's
Might be
about,
thinking about heat from
Yeah.
now on with, things looking the way they are trending.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I think it's so needed. When we did the one down in, what was the name of the school?
Starts with a W. Willard. Yes, thank you.
It took a lot to gear up for you. I know it's not the kind of thing where you just go, oh, okay, you're now an emergency shelter. It impacts surrounding property owners and all that kind of stuff. My concern about this particular one being right next door to a Boys and Girls Club, and then I thought, what difference does that make? But I would like to know more about it. I really would.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, there are a few things that we're still investigating that have come up recently that we want to make sure that we get all the details hammered out before we come back. So I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Probably we'll know more in a week or so.
Okay.
Be in a better position.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. I think that's all I had.
Thank you, Municipal Counselor's Office. Citizens to be heard? I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Hinkle moves to adjourn. It's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.